Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. Sean, what is on your mind today?
Last week, we talked a lot about community, right? Finding your people. Maybe some people jump in, maybe some people don't. I think I mentioned I had a couple conversations recently with either new to me FAers or people that were new to the community or whatever. Anyway, there's one person in particular that lives somewhat close to me. I'm not going to say this person's name because I don't feel like it's my place to out them in this story. So a really cool person. We've connected on Instagram. This person reaches out to me several weeks ago and was like, hey, would you ever, want to meet, get a coffee, just connect? And so we made arrangements. I met them and we just had a great time catching up for 2 hours. So I'm not even catching up, but getting to know each other and just talking through life. Completely different stage of life. I'm 44. They're 20, I think.
Younger.
So yeah, very much. Been diagnosed for a while, so he's not new to FA, but maybe new to connecting with a bunch of other people with FA. And he had recently was at a meeting where somebody talked about the rides that Ride Ataxia hosts, and he got really interested. So anyway,
Awesome.
he thinking about different rides he could be a part of, and he's expressing the interest in how he's thinking about and shopping for bikes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I've got what I believe to be a beautiful trike.
Right. Yeah.
It's a Catrike 700 and it's gorgeous. It's not beat up like yours, Kyle. But I also don't ride it every weekend like maybe you do. So I told him, I'm like, hey, you know what? I've got a trike and I'm training for a stair climb. I'm just not able to ride it at all right now. So if you want to borrow it, you can. Like, I will gladly let you take it home, hang on to it for several months, whatever. Like, get used to it. So he was intrigued. He was like, oh, that's sweet. Let's do it. So we went into a few details he had to think about, right? The shoes, the pedals, we make arrangements. He and his family meet me like a week later with the truck, and we make it happen. They borrowed the truck. And his dad is a bit of a road cyclist himself. So he, has got some tools and he knows about the clip shoes and pedals and all that. So I basically just told him what I thought they need to figure out or he needs to test. So, the ticket home on a Sunday, and I thought it's going to be a little bit before they're able to get pedals and shoes and everything that fits him. The FA and I get on the phone on Thursday. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? Did you order some pedals yet? Like, where you at? He's like, yeah, I've been out 3 times on the trike. And I'm like, what? So they got pedals, he got shoes. I think he's still trying to find one that works well for him, but he's at a place where he can get out. And he's telling me stories about the first ride. It was a little awkward, but him and his dad, they had a good time, and it was short, but it was fine. The next ride, a little bit longer, still a couple things that were hurting and not really comfortable with the maneuvering, but it was fine. And then, dude, the third ride, he was going downhill.
Oh, no!
He turned a little too fast. And he flipped. Or he didn't flip.
Geez.
The trike, went sideways and
wheels.
It caused him to fall out. And then the trike went back and landed on all 3s. So the trike's fine, no biggie. But also, who cares, right? He's fine. and he
Okay.
wants to do it again. He's like,
Uh-huh.
I'll go again. But he suffered a little bit of road rash on his knees, on
Right.
his elbows, a little bit everywhere. And that, shook him up a little bit
Yeah, for
internally.
sure.
And that was the end of the ride for them that day. But nothing broken, nothing sprained. And he's probably a little internally beat up. But he said, we're going to make a few adjustments and I'll get out again next week.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
believe he is still interested. But yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because you would think, oh, it's low to the ground, 3 wheels. It's impossible to float, right? But you and I both know that it's actually pretty easy, given all the right ingredients.
Totally. And I feel like you don't quite fully understand that until it happens.
Yeah.
That could be a perfect opportunity for him to be like, nope, this is not for
I'm
me.
done.
Right?
Yeah.
And no one would blame him, right? But it takes some gumption and courage to be like, all right, let's give it another shot because this seems great. So cool.
You don't really know the boundaries of a trike
Right.
until you lose control and
Yeah.
cross them. So I'm like, I'm so thankful you're not hurt, but don't let that slow you down from trying to get
Right. Cool. Well, Sean, today we have a conversation with a couple of new friends who are providing an incredible service to the community. I hope everybody enjoys our conversation with Eric and Dylan.
All right, another conversation we've been looking forward to. Dr. Eric Mitchell and Dylan Mitchell are joining us today from, well, at least today, snowy Pennsylvania.
Absolutely.
And Eric is are you the founder? Did you start Neurodiversity Consultants?
Yeah. I mean, I guess our group has been together in various ways for a couple decades now, and of course, Dylan has been part of this group, just in kind of in some ways the inspiration for the development of the group, but also now as a full-time consultant with us.
Since you just said Dylan was a bit of the inspiration, tell us what y'all do and how you got into this line of work.
Autism or neurodiversity in general, it runs in the family a bit. And, so we have, when I was growing up, it was kind of just assumed that, everybody would help out with, a couple of family members who had their own, kind of challenges. And so it's kind of just in the DNA, if you will, as well as the culture of the family. And, when Dylan was born in 2001, it was clear early on that there was some differences in the way that he looked at the world. His vocabulary was, way beyond his peers. He was, just incredibly interested in certain key kind of, interests, whether it's trains, dinosaurs. He would become an expert in those areas and pretty much, inform everybody else in the world about his expertise.
Excessively, even.
Of course. So, it was kind of clear early on that, his brain just worked differently. And that was inspiring, some challenging at times, but really inspiring at times as well. Around the same time that he was born was also, it might have been even within weeks, was when autism as a concept blew up. It was on the cover back when magazines were a thing. It was on the cover of Time and Newsweek in the same week. And everybody's like, well, what are we doing for autism? In this world at that time in Philadelphia. And I was fresh off my postdoc fellowship, working with autistic folks in Hawaii after, finishing at Penn. And then I went out to Hawaii for a postdoc, got trained out there, came back. And so I kind of hit the ground running, trying to develop programs here in the Philadelphia region for autistic kids initially, and working with various organizations all the way up through college and then eventually into, lifespan, for folks who saw the world differently, and experienced the world differently. And, so when, you start to engage with folks along the way like that, whether they're self-advocates, whether they're family members, whether they're professionals or what have you, researchers even, you start to see different angles of the neurodiversity community in different ways.
Sure.
And you start to realize who, your partners are going to be, not just in raising kids and, trying to make connections and foster those relationships, whether it's, what an old friend of mine called Tuesdays at Eric's, which was kind of the play group that Dylan grew
Nice.
up with.
Yeah.
All the way through the professional development with our neurodiversity consultants group where, recognizing needs in the region that just weren't being addressed, whether it's kids who, didn't necessarily have the specialization needed to kind of recognize their strengths and let their strengths blossom. So we started working with educators, speech therapists, behaviorists, self-advocates that really understood how these kids or teenagers were thinking in a way that was more affirming of who they were, not just trying to force some of the behavioral principles on them, but really kind of nurturing that individual thinking and trying to help them foster that into success in the world. That kind of a neurodiversity affirming model started to become pretty important to us, was always important, but, started to be recognized as the way that we wanted to proceed. So started to assemble kind of a group of folks that either had children and kind of took more of a neurodiversity affirming approach to raising kids, whether it's professionals that, kind of understood that concept more from a kind of relationship-based approach, and started to build this consulting model where there's 25, 30 of us that, we can tap into. All of them have their own strengths in different domains, but many of them are self-advocates that are, wanting to do the work with other neurodivergent folk, coming up and building those connections. So that's where Dylan started to feed in initially, kind of getting some supports himself as he was growing up, but then, not from our group specifically, but, in the course of schooling and so on. And then, now as a mentor for folks when he was going through college, and now as a full therapist, working with neurodivergent folk.
Dylan, we'll let you chat in a minute, but hold on a second. Eric,
Sure.
I want to go back a little bit in your story.
Sure.
You said you were doing postdoc about the time Dylan was born. So I'm curious, was this an area of vocational interest for you already?
It was.
It's kind of maybe a terrible way to say it, but maybe Dylan got lucky having you for a dad if you were already in that space. That's cool to know. All right. Dylan, I would love to switch over to you a little bit. Today, you're a licensed therapist. You're working in this space. How does it make you feel, or what do you feel when you hear your dad talking about, those first 10, 12, 15 years where you didn't really have any control over who you were and how you developed and so on?
Well, the first thing it makes me feel is bashful, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of, I suppose, as the son of Dr. Eric Mitchell, there is definitely a little bit of a name that precedes me sometimes in my work. A lot of the folks I work with, especially through neurodiversity consultants, I'll hop onto a new referral and everybody looks me in the eyes and says, "Oh, I know your father. He's an inspiration." So a little bashful, but also very grateful. I was very well supported from a young age. And there's something in it as well, though, which is that the idea that I didn't have any control over my development isn't necessarily true. I was given a lot of tools to advocate for myself and a lot of support from all different arenas in my life to be able to interpret my emotions. I started writing poetry very young as an emotional outlet, and I published my first poetry book last year, so it continued being something that was a relevant outlet in my life. And I was even writing just 2 days ago. And as well as interest, finding peer groups that I can run through interests with, and slowly discovering how to have the very the very unheard of thing for a lot of neurodivergent folks, a conversation about something that is not one of my core interests. It's getting to that point and being able to meet people where they're at conversationally instead of just forcing them to come to me is something that I feel like I was pretty well equipped to. But I also find that I put in a lot of work on my own because of the awareness I had about my own situation and about my own symptoms, that I was given a lot of tools to forge my own path at the exact same time. And that's something I'm very grateful for. So yes, you're absolutely right that I am lucky to have Dr. Eric Mitchell as my father, but that doesn't mean it's the only indicator of success. And there's a lot of folks who might not have that level of support when they're young, who we can still enter their life and give them that level of support and give them the tools to succeed on their own right. As long as we take that strengths-based approach that is so key and important to neurodiversity consultants.
Sure. When did you decide, if you made the decision, that this would be an area of vocational interest for you as well? Was that always kind of the track? Like that was always something you were attracted to in helping others? Or was there a season of life you're like, you know what, this is, there's nothing better. This is what I want to do?
It was actually a bit of a journey. I didn't have much interest in getting involved with it for a while. I had such an integral understanding of it. I was raised in it. It was around me, and it never even occurred to me that it could be an area of vocational interest. I would advocate for myself. I would advocate for my friends of similar neurodivergent backgrounds in like school settings and friend settings and things like that. But I had such an intrinsic understanding that my focus was on other things for a while. There was a long time where I wanted to become a director, and I'm a very creative person by nature as well. So I had all these different interests, but going through high school, I had a lot of experiences with friends and significant others where I experienced mental health challenges, and I had that, and where they experienced mental health challenges especially. See, my own mental health struggles were not the catalyst for me to be involved in mental health. It was the ability to help others, the understanding that I not only was raised in an environment where I could become in tune with people's thoughts and feelings and understand what they might need out of me, or at least get to a point where they can feel comfortable identifying what they need out of me and being able to assist them in that way. So by the time high school was over, long story short, I had gone from somebody who was very passionate about being creative and liked helping people on the side to somebody who had a calling toward helping people and then had a passion for being creative on the side. That's sort of the way that it materialized for me. And then, I had my wayfinding through early college at Temple University, and then my master's program at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, where I slowly built up a generalist skill set so that I could help people in a lot of different contexts. That core phrase that always is going through my mind that dates all the way back to the Ruttenberg Autism Center, I believe, is you meet the individual where they're at and you walk them into the world. And that is the message at the core of any service I've ever provided to somebody.
I love that. Dylan, for reference of our listeners, we can see you on screen, and I see the MS after your name.
Yes.
But then your dad, Dr. Eric, I see the PhD. So I'm just curious, are you pursuing more? And what's your end goal, or what do you think that end goal might be?
There certainly is a pursuit of it right now, but I'm sure I don't need to tell most people listening that PhD programs are wildly competitive. And so I've dropped some applications. I'm looking at that track. I finished my master's a couple of years ago. And since then, I decided that for me personally, a really effective work loop is getting the education and then practicing in the field and going back and forth. And my master's, while very good in terms of education, didn't provide a lot of practicum opportunities, unfortunately. So I've been taking some extra time to work and practice and refine and expand my skill set. And so I've I've dropped a few applications to schools that I would really love to get into, but at least for the moment, I don't feel a burning pressure to go straight into the PhD. I definitely will eventually, but I got into the field to assist people with my unique skill set. Sometimes I tell my friends that I feel more like myself when I'm helping somebody than I do in any other situation. And so that is something that I'm also not too keen to rush right out of and back into classes. I really want to sit in this area of my life where I feel very actualized for a while, and then I can refine that skill set when I feel as though I have hit the ceiling for what I can do with my current education level.
Sure. Dylan, you've talked about the triumphs that you've had. And I want to know about the challenges along the way. If you could point out one or two to talk about.
Yeah, you want to get into challenges? I can talk that talk. Let's do it. So several challenges that are unsurprising as growing up as a child on the spectrum is that I did not always have the greatest circles of friends around me. And partially because I didn't understand how to create like a reciprocal relationship with somebody. I would sort of talk at somebody and so the people I attracted were people who either just didn't want to bring much to the table or had such strong personalities that I gravitated toward them intrinsically. But I didn't have a lot of social relationships where I felt as an equal with somebody. So I sort of felt a lot of intrinsic power imbalance in a lot of areas of my life, and it didn't lead to the greatest groups of friends, quite honestly. And so that lack of support there was definitely a challenge for me, and especially a challenge during my teenage years. It only really started to remedy itself when I got into college and started making good friends at Temple University through the Writers Exchange student organization. But in terms of other challenges, even to this day, I'm horrendously clumsy. My motor coordination, absolutely terrible. I'm sure my dad knows this and was very sweet about it when I was young, but like the benchmarks for when I was catching a ball or when I was tying my shoes were embarrassingly late. And to this day, I cannot whistle, which is maybe just a me thing. But, and yeah, so that would also impede how I participated in sports and athletics and a lot of those more generalized social arenas that a lot of people make their connections and strengthen them through.
I actually have a quick example of that.
Yeah. Let's roast me. Let's hear it.
Go ahead, Dad.
No, it's interesting. It kind of ties together a couple of things that Dylan's been talking about, and we were playing volleyball with kind of like a beach ball in the yard with a couple of his a few of his friends, kind of play group, folks that the families would always get the kids together and work on various social challenges between the guys. But Dylan was 11 years old and had kind of a meltdown. He would occasionally have meltdowns where he just gets so frustrated, so overwhelmed. He just needed to take time away. Mm-hmm. And so he went inside and he wrote a poem called My Sorrow. Should I throw this out there, Dylan?
Why are we putting my sorrow into the public eye?
This is an 11-year-old version of you writing a poem.
I get the feeling that if I say no, we're going to keep talking about it. So why don't you just throw it out there?
Okay. So Dylan, as an 11-year-old, he goes up into his room. He takes a little bit of time after having a little bit of a meltdown outside, and he writes this poem. It says, the crosswind blew and the ship crashed. The passengers became unsteady, and not all of them made it. I was on a boat, alone, on a lifeboat. I got home, apologized for my reckless driving, and returned to my conscience. That's an 11-year-old.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
And so Dylan then writes that poem, comes back out, is focused, is able to re-engage with the situation, and finished off the group that we had that afternoon. just just really interesting example of how his neurodiversity and his coordination and all that kind of took over, but then also was the way that he was able to re-engage and get through that to his strength. So
Dylan, thanks for letting your dad highlight that.
Of course, yeah.
It's a nice piece of writing.
Yeah.
For an 11-year-old. I don't know. Maybe I have an 11-year-old's taste for poetry also. I mean,
I want to just add, you mentioned 11-year-old Dylan had a bit of a breakdown, and I feel like I have breakdowns still. Maybe I need to work through some things, whether that be therapy or pick up journaling or whatever. Like, I love hearing how 11-year-old Dylan was able to navigate that day.
There it is, and I appreciate the compliment on the poem as well. And but yeah, this also leads to one of the other struggles, is that emotional regulation. Really, really tough for a lot of folks on the spectrum, myself included. I mean, 11-year-old Dylan wrote poetry to deal with his emotions. 24-year-old Dylan is writing poetry to deal with his emotions. It's, of course, I'm not prescribing everybody on the spectrum with poetry. That's not necessarily the answer, but yeah, emotional regulation is definitely a thing. Those waves of anger, of sadness, of disappointment, and all of those various emotions sometimes hit folks on the spectrum like a shock grenade. And a lot of people find it very, very difficult to come back to center after that. And that is a lot of what we work on with folks, especially in the younger populations, where it's not just necessarily the social skills and the things you always think of. It is that breaking point of frustration or that breaking point of sadness that leads somebody to disengage. And if we can get somebody re-engaged and facing the challenges of life head on, that is where triumph and success comes from. And from triumph and success, and from also failure, but the willingness to try again, all of those things create improvement. And that improvement is gradual, incremental over time. It's progress, not perfection. But as long as you are willing to keep trying and overcome those emotions, that's when you're being successful.
That's huge. I love hearing that, because I think we all know there's that internal battle always brewing. Whether you're neurodivergent or not, like, there's always that internal argument or tug of war with what you believe and what you want to believe, what you want in life, and all that stuff. So I love that you point that out. You're really you're helping people discover themselves again and get to a point where they're okay with moving forward, whatever that might look like for them.
Absolutely.
Dr. Eric, I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about the organization, the Neurodivergent Consultants. What do you guys do, and how does that work as a not only as a vocation, but as a service to the families and individuals that you guys engage with?
Yeah, so I mean, the origination of it came out of some conversations that I had with what's called the Center for Autism here in Philadelphia. Center for Autism was started by Dr. Burt Ruttenberg back in the 1950s as the first autism center in the country. And Bert, was kind of an inspiration for a lot of us in this region working with autistic kids. He was kind of the mentor for Stanley Greenspan, if you know Floor Time or DIR. So kind of that relationship-based model, as opposed to the ABA, kind of more behavioral model. That was kind of, the seeds of that were started here in Philadelphia, and the center's still, still functioning today. But, over the years, I'd had many conversations with folks over at the center, with, folks that, Bird and other folks that, that were part of that evolution, where we're realizing that not all services can happen in the center. Right. We have to be able to flex out that model so that we can build relationships, sometimes with contingencies and so on, in a way that is affirming, but that we can use that relationship-based model in the wild. not just by going to the center. So we started what was called the Ruttenberg Autism Center as the consulting arm of the Center for Autism I think it was about 2014, 15, thereabouts. And from that group that we kind of hand selected all these folks that I've worked with over the years, started to build up kind of resources for school districts, mental health agencies, colleges to tap into to either do evaluations, conferences, trainings for their staff, and also mentoring and coaching, as well as therapy on top of that, that could be accessible to folks on the spectrum or neurodivergents in general. They could work into the schools, into the homes, into the communities, to kind of give another layer where other services really weren't touching previously. And so we wanted to do that with folks that really understood what it is to either be neurodivergent, or who were, connected directly to that community. When Bert passed away in 2020 at the ripe young age of, 97? I think it was. We decided to take that consulting group and rename ourselves under neurodiversity consultants. Still respecting Bert's, vision and so on, but also understanding that we're serving a community that's not just autism, it's also about neurodiversity and how that fits into the world. Currently, we have, as I think I said earlier, 20, 25, 30 different consultants that we can hand select. And so when a particular situation, everything is an individualized kind of, formula as far as, or equation that we have to figure out for each individual as far as what we think could be helpful for them. Say a school district comes to us, or a family comes to us, or even a self-advocate, a person, a neurodivergent individual in their 20s, 30s, 70s, even, they come to us, they're like, well, which of our consultants can be that proper fit? And what can we construct with you? Not just what's on the menu of all the services that an agency can provide, but what can we design with you that's going to make sense for your situation? And so that's where the expertise comes in.
What do you think people on the spectrum, what are some of the biggest barriers they're up against in our world today? I would imagine there's hundreds. So if you want to, just what are the big ones that come to mind right away?
Yeah, Dylan, did you want to jump on?
Yeah. There's one theme that follows me like a ghost through almost all of my sessions here, and it's that our world has increasingly become self-insulated. Are you guys familiar with the concept of like primary, secondary, and tertiary spaces?
Mm-hmm.
Well, just for the sake of the audience, I'll lay this out very simply. Primary space is a space you sort of live in, spend your time in. That's your home. A secondary space is a space that you go to out of obligation. So work or school, or some people think of like the gym as a secondary space. There's a lot of things that you might go to out of a personal obligation. And a tertiary space is a space that is neither of those things. You go there as a choice, not because you have to, but because you want to, because you like doing things there, or you like meeting people there. And the issue that's sort of come up, not just for neurodiverse folks, but for really everyone in our world, is that the idea of a tertiary space has become increasingly monetized and gradually has begun to disappear. So when people are spending time together, they're spending time at each other's houses, or because of increasing costs and the sort of social aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic as well, the idea of neutral places to meet that are accessible both socially and financially has become less and less accessible for folks. And this is a huge factor for folks on the spectrum or neurodiverse in plenty of ways, because sometimes these folks need a little bit extra time to figure out their social lives, and they might not come out of school with a really strong core social circle that they can rely on. And when the ways to meet people and engage with people are more vague and convoluted, it becomes more and more difficult for them to actually access those social dimensions of life. You have folks who are doing pretty okay in their primary space, are excelling in their secondary spaces, but have no way to access any sort of tertiary spaces, and their life is at a critical imbalance. And it's something that professionally is very, very tough to fix because it's not always a skills thing. Sometimes you work up all the skills and you work up all the confidence, and then there just isn't an answer in front of you. There isn't a next step because of the way that our world is built right now. So that's definitely a challenge that comes up in a lot of my cases, especially with clients in adult populations.
Yeah.
I love that you break it down like that, and it's so clear. Like, it makes so much sense if the access to those spaces is cut down across the board for everyone by 50%. That takes away the time that's needed to navigate those spaces for neurodivergent people. That's pretty eye-opening. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's Robert Putnam does a lot of work in this area. Robert Putnam is the author of probably the most famous work is Bowling Alone. It was published back in, I think, the 90s, if I'm remembering correctly. But the idea that the access to these communal, if you will, opportunities has really dissipated over time. It's almost an exponential effect on folks who really struggle to make those connections in the first place sometimes. And so Robert Putnam talks about, the idea of social capital as being almost a collective, a community kind of sense of social capital, where if you go to a place where everybody is kind of there for the same reason, it's easier to affiliate. It's easier to treat each other kindly. There's a code, there's a culture that you don't have to necessarily work as hard for. But when those institutions disappear, you need to do that for yourself individually with each incremental person that you meet. Developing that social capital incrementally with each individual is really onerous and sometimes very, senseless or just unnerving for various neurodivergent folk. And it sometimes feels like we're kind of spinning our wheels trying to make those connections at times. We're there to help that process of connecting those dots to the extent that person wants to connect and feel connected to the world or part of an affiliation of some sort, to have meaning and purpose and solidarity with other folks, whether it's in the neurodiversity community or another type of community. But we need those institutions to be bolstered and forged. It's not just about making a dollar. It's about connecting our lives.
I'm definitely going to be thinking differently about the pool at my condo complex when during the summer we all get together on Fridays. I'm going to cherish that time because I can see that those kinds of things are dwindling.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Those moments are definitely to be cherished. Absolutely. Anything that gives you connectedness to people or to an idea or an activity is absolutely key.
As you're talking, I'm making the connection in my head. When I go on vacation, let's say a cruise, it's easy to connect with people because we're all there on vacation, right? So very common interest. If you're at the hospital, it's the same thing. But there's probably a lot more empathy and understanding. Of course, at the airport or a hotel, you're all still there for a million different reasons, and it's harder to connect. You don't really know. But I do see it being really easy to connect with people when, I forget exactly how you said it, Dylan, when the interest is similar.
Yeah, when it's aligned, when you're both in a chosen tertiary space for kind of the same reason.
Just to plug Dylan a little bit, Dylan has gotten his certification as a therapeutic game master, using Dungeons and Dragons and other kinds of role playing to foster those social connections, develop those comforts, those social comforts in the context of being able to game together. And so that I think that's an example of where we're trying to build out those opportunities. And so I didn't mean to steal the thunder there, but
No, it's okay. As long as the thunder's striking, I'm more than happy.
And that just speaks to something you said a little bit ago, Dylan. Finding ways to meet people where they're at and not necessarily trying to make them come to your side of the fence or the world.
Especially with folks in neurodivergent categories. Sometimes you got to go a little bit further to meet them there. But at the same time, sometimes when you put in that effort to meet them there, you get a lot back because folks aren't always used to people going that far out of their way to connect with them. And those connections can be very strong, titanium cherished kind of social connections when you just go that extra mile for somebody out of the understanding that they might not have the same ability as you in this category, but they might have some wonderful strengths that are locked behind just the lack of chances to interact.
Yeah. Obviously you guys are based in the Philadelphia area, or it's obvious to me. Does your work extend beyond that region, or is it mostly just that area? Like if we have a listener in Texas, is there any help you can offer, or is it mostly kind of in-person, close by kind of access?
The coaching model, the mentoring model isn't kind of restricted state by state. So that kind of an approach, we can provide that online as well.
Cool.
So connecting folks is relatively easy in that respect. We have some of our therapists have, the ability to practice across state lines. Personally, I have what's called a certification under SIPACT, which means I can practice telehealth across state lines in most states in the union.
Sure.
And there's a map on the SIPACT, where states have engaged in legislation or passed legislation where that telehealth is more accessible. So we can certainly do that in a variety of different ways. So
if somebody listening is loving what you guys are saying and appreciating their perspectives, how can they connect or follow more deeply?
So I think the easiest way is probably just our website, neurodiversityconsultants.com. And certainly, reach out to us via email or accessing through the website there. And we also do these free 30-minute consultations. So, if somebody just wants to kind of get some thoughts on how they might want to proceed with something, as far as whether it's service related or educationally related or, kind of getting on the right track, then we can set up that time to do that remotely as well.
Dylan, how do we find your poetry? You said it's recently published, right?
Right. Yeah. It is not the largest thing in the world. It's mainly a passion project. There wasn't a lot of marketing that went into it, but I am on Amazon and I believe I'm on Barnes & Noble as well. My book is called The Dove Who Became Human by Dylan Mitchell, and it's a poetry anthology of a lot of the work of my earlier years. And if you listen to this podcast and then you read the book, it might actually make more sense to you than it does the people who actually know me. So it's
by earlier years,
might
after 11 years old.
Yeah.
That's not included.
If you liked my sorrow, wait until you hear the stuff I made with a fully formed frontal lobe. It's crazy. Yeah. But yeah, I'm out there, and if you want to check out some of that stuff, that's great. I also have a couple of novel drafts just sitting in my Google Drive that I should probably get around to publishing at some point. So, maybe keep your eye on it if you want to hear more from me.
Absolutely. Well, but keep an eye for sure on the organization, or what do you guys refer to yourselves as? A firm,
just a consulting group, I guess.
Okay, a group,
for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Neurodiversityconsultants.com. Of course, we'll keep an eye on Dylan. But go look for his book, and then, of course, we'll follow along in the next 20, 30, 40 years, whatever you're bringing to the table. I've had an absolute pleasure meeting you both. I'm so thankful that the father and son duo made time and were able to join us today and talk about what you're doing and how beneficial it has been for you, and obviously how it's probably life-changing for a lot of other people. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks to you guys for all that you do and all that you bring to the community as well.
Yeah, that awareness is absolutely vital. Thank you for having us on.
Sean, what an impressive duo. I'm so impressed with how purpose-driven their mission is and how well it fits them. My favorite thing that Dylan said was he feels more like himself when he's helping other people. That really struck me.
Yeah, incredibly insightful interview. I like humor, so I appreciated that Dylan was okay with his dad roasting him. He was like, come on, bring it on, roast me. My only bummer about that particular interview, it was originally supposed to be in person. You know, we were going to be at an event in the Philadelphia area, and we had arranged to meet Eric. And I'm a little bummed that it didn't happen that way, but I'm so grateful that they made it happen virtually, and it was an honor to interview them and hear their story.
Yep, Sean, I'm very thankful for that interview, and I'm thankful for a lot of other things in my life as well. And as we do every episode, I want to express a note of gratitude, but I want you to go first. Who do you have to thank today?
Tying back to community and tribe, I'm going to say thank you to a handful of people in the FA community that put some energy and effort into creating space for people to connect and to meet one another. So just this morning, I was able to get on a Zoom call or Zoom session with a handful of other FAers from really all over the place and meet some for the first time. So I believe some of the people that help run the efforts are FARA ambassadors. So I am thankful for those folks that really volunteered their time to help connect other FAers. And this particular event that I was on today was it's called FA Hangouts. And they do, I don't know, a month maybe, where it's just, if you have FA and you want to come hang out, get online and just virtually connect with other people. So I'm saying thank you to the whole program and idea, but also a special shout out to Michael Gare and Noah Griffith, who were hosting today's hangout. And we've had them both on the show at different points over the years. So it was cool to see them online and help facilitate connection amongst other FAers. So thank you to that program and to those guys.
Sean, as you know, we released the trailer for the new film, The Highest Road. Part of the purpose of putting the trailer out is to let people know that we've applied to film festivals.
Yeah.
And so that they could search the Rolodex in their head and be like, oh, I know somebody at a film festival that can help out. Because, you know, with our experience with the ataxia, I think we both realized that in order to get into one of these things, I mean, I was looking at this film festival online and it said there were 2,800 submissions and 100 films selected. And that was a small festival. So when you're talking about a bigger one like Tribeca or Toronto or something like that, you know, I mean, the chances are so much smaller to get in. And so, you know, I really wanted to see the idea that, hey, if you know somebody at a festival, let us know. My thank you note goes out to the people that reached out after they saw that. And who knows how the connection will work out, but those people took the initiative to be like, hey, I think I know someone who might be able to help, and we'll see where it goes. So thank you to the people that reached out.
I'll echo that.
And thanks again to Eric and Dylan for providing an insightful conversation today. Check out our show notes at twodisableddudes.com for a description of this episode and links to anything we talked about today. If you like what you hear, please please share it with a friend. It really helps the show and expands the audience. Subscribe on all your podcast apps. Until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.